that was his name. After all, his arrival last evening had not been anticipated, and he had most certainly not been on the guest list. That was only one of many problems with unexpected guests. Phyllida was tempted to lay a blanket over the poor man, but decided she'd best not disrupt the scene. Mr. Waring was young, in his late 20s, with light brown hair and a matching moustache. His attire was stylish, the pre-made trousers being the sort bought at a department store instead of having been tailored, but fine nonetheless. He wore a coat of excellent wool and fine cut that was only 2 years out of style. It was clean, and she noted with satisfaction, possessed a fully intact hem. In Phyllida's opinion, a sagging hemline was the first indication of a lack of attention to detail and appearance, and was usually borne out in other ways. Phyllida glanced at the clock and saw that it was just 7. Mrs. Agatha wouldn't normally be up for at least 2 hours, and even then she would go into her office to write for a time before joining her husband and their guests. Phyllida was also reminded to schedule the men to come and oil the clocks next week, after the house guests had gone. It would be 2 weeks early, but she'd noticed the grandfather clock at the bottom of the main staircase was grinding a bit. The more pressing task was to inform Mr. Dobble of the situation, and the very thought was enough to have her wishing for another very strong cup of Darjeeling. One usually needed some type of fortification before interacting with the Mallowans' butler, and since it was hardly past 7 in the morning, she would have to forego the rye whiskey. Unwilling to leave the library unattended, Phyllida rang for Mr. Dobble. Admittedly, the idea of calling the butler to her rather than going to him, as one would normally do, made her smile. Not that that was unusual. Phyllida, for all her exacting standards and regimental mind, was possessed of an optimistic, pragmatic, and sunny personality, although she was most often required to act in a reserved manner as the individual who managed the majority of the household staff, not to mention its budget. She had been known to play whist with the parlour-maids, assist with fashion opinions for the maids during their days off, and give relationship advice to a chambermaid related to the former chauffeur. He'd been a poor prospect, due to his wandering eye and hands. And more than one of the kitchen maids had seen the very correct housekeeper go soft and gooey-eyed over a litter of fuzzy kittens. 2 of said kittens had subsequently found their way into a basket in Phyllida's sitting room, joining her collection of detective novels and books on nearly every topic under the sun, and were now full-grown sleek cats who disdained the basket that had once been their bed. However, Stilton and Rye helped keep at bay any mice who might confuse the larder for their homestead. Holding one or the other in her lap, when the felines permitted, of course, also provided Phyllida moments of calm and restoration, which was particularly appreciated after dealing with Mr. Dobble. Phyllida had not come up working in domestic service, starting as a scullery maid or chambermaid when she was 13 or 14, and making her way to kitchen maid or parlour maid, and then through the hierarchy from there. That made her quite unusual. In fact, she hadn't worked in service at all until several years after the Great War and her work with the army had ended. The reasons she'd chosen employment as the housekeeper of a large manor were excellent, and no one's business but her own. That was part of why she and Mr. Dobble weren't particularly friendly. She suspected he was suspicious of a woman who had come into the coveted position of housekeeper without a long history of scrubbing floors, as far as he knew, and who was comparatively young, although certainly not that young, and most definitely not inexperienced, to have such a prestigious role in a large, gentrified household. And despite his best efforts, she did not deign to share with him the details of her background, marital status, or age, even when pressed. But Phyllida was certain most of Mr. Dobble's dislike was due to the fact that she lived up to her name, not only in personality, but with her hair colour. It was bright strawberry gold. The first time she'd met him, the butler had eyed her up and down and suggested that she subdue that fire upon your head. She had refrained from suggesting that he remove the walking stick that appeared to have been inserted into his bottom,